This episode was recorded well before the COVID-19 pandemic, but it seems even more relevant today to highlight what first responders are faced with in their jobs and how it impacts their lives. Susan founded an organization that helps those who have helped others heal themselves from post-traumatic stress disorder. You'll have an even greater appreciation for how they risk their lives to keep us alive.
Our whole society tells us the answers are outside of you. So we learn more, we do more, we buy more. It's always about not having enough. Knowing that the truth is, the answers are inside of us.
Absolutely.
And they always have been. And we specifically are a generation, or I should say a profession of people who have taken care of looking outside to evaluate where's the threat, where's the crisis, where's the emergency, where's the problem, where's the chaos. And then we go towards that. And what we were never trained to do is go inside.
Yeah. We're recording live the Pollinating the Planet with Love show. We're here outside of Santa Cruz, California at 1440 Multiversity. And I have my next lovely guest, Susan Farren. We are about ready to go in. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay, let's do it. Welcome everyone to the Pollinating the Planet with Love show. I'm your host, Beth Bell, where we talk about life journey lessons and pearls of wisdom that my guests have learned along the way. I'd like to introduce today's guest, but before I do, I want to mention that we are at a very sacred place near Santa Barbara, California. We are at 1440 Multiversity. I always say that wrong. And it is just the most gorgeous place. There's redwoods all around. The energy here is just magnificent. And it just couldn't be a better place to have a magical alignment with a new guest on the show.
Yeah. Sacred space, for sure.
Yes, for sure. So my guest today is Susan Farren, is the founder of First Responders Resiliency, Inc., as well as a speaker, author, and educator. As a paramedic in both the public and private sectors, Susan began focusing on the history and cognitive science of public safety. Her research led her to design a program providing psychological and physical resiliency for those who put others' lives before their own. Amazing work.
Ta-da.
Yes. Before we get into all of that, I always like to start out with a question that's more about what did you think you were going to be when you were a little girl, and is this what you're doing now?
That's a great question. I thought I would be a paramedic.
Okay.
And I was.
And you were.
I spent my whole life serving in that capacity to one degree or another.
Yeah.
Training people, supervising them, educating them, or being on the streets, training them, taking care of the patients.
Yeah.
Which is what I always wanted to do.
Yeah, amazing. Well, at some point, though, you made some twist and turn, or the universe maybe made a twist and turn for you, I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
Share with us a little bit about how, after that 30 years, or if there's any part of the journey in those 30 years that's relevant, I'm sure there is, to what you're doing today, and how that inspired you.
Well, it absolutely would be, if you would ascribe to the fact that the universe made the choice for me, I believe that.
Yeah.
Because for me, I had been a paramedic for, actually it was close to 33 years, when my life began to shift in ways I couldn't have anticipated. And so when you hear people talk about, I lost everything. In a matter of 5 years, I had gone through a divorce from the man who had been the father to all 5 of my children, who was also a first responder. And then 3 years ago on Easter Sunday, I began to urinate blood and discovered I had kidney cancer. And that led to me first getting a terminal diagnosis, and then going in for surgery and finding out that I was not terminal. But in that surgery, they would paralyze my abdominal muscle in the process, which just is a side effect of surgery
Now,
sometimes.
I had no idea about this. I want to break it apart just a little bit, because there's a lot of big stuff right there. So you get diagnosed with something that they say is terminal, meaning you're going to die.
I have a year to live.
Yeah. And how do you deal with that at that point? Because obviously things shifted, but at that point, how did you feel?
I don't know. I don't even know that you can describe it. For me, it just, this awareness of that I had spent my whole life serving others and having children, thinking I had 30 more years, 40 more years left, and that I had been running this race not knowing the finish line was right in front of me. So it was hard to find. The first inclination I had was, I've been running this like it was a marathon, and all along it was only a sprint. So scary.
Yeah, that is scary.
It's life altering.
Yeah.
Nothing prepares you for that news. Nothing prepares you for those feelings.
Yeah. Were there any tools that you had to develop to really just get through life at that point before you found out that it was not going to be terminal?
So that window, that diagnosis initially only lasted 36 hours. They sent me in some high intensity CT scanning, X-rays, and discovered that I had what's called a hemangioma on my liver, which is like a port wine stain, a birthmark on the liver that looks like cancer in the scan.
Okay.
And so,
wow,
yeah,
that was probably the longest 36 hours of your life.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Wow. So you find out that you don't have terminal, but you do have an issue.
I do have a tumor in my kidney.
Yes. And
so
then what happens?
They do take me in, take out half the kidney, take out the tumor, inadvertently paralyze my belly in the process. And the unique side effect to that paralysis was I can't sit for extended periods of time. Well, I drove to a job down in Alameda County, which was about an hour and a half, 2 hours with traffic, and I was having this excruciating abdominal pain and didn't know what the problem was. And that was the paralysis was creating that. So because I could not get to my job, I could not work at that job. And so in a very short window of time, I'd gone from that diagnosis to major surgery to the paralysis to being out of work to trying to figure out how I was going to survive and actually moving into a fifth wheel and trying to figure out what I was going to do. The unique story to this whole thing is that after I had my surgery, the surgeon made a comment that changed everything for me. He said, "We see a lot of this in first responders." And I said, "You see a lot of what?" And he said, "Organ cancer." And that really was a defining moment for me, recognizing that I needed to find out what was going on with first responders.
Yeah.
And that's where that research began.
Amazing.
And that led me down this path of finding everything from organ cancer to isolation, depression, addiction, adultery, divorce, and then ultimately to suicide. And when I found these statistics, and I went through my own organ cancer, obviously, I was critically depressed after losing my job and my health and everything. I thought, if this can happen to me, right? I think of myself as one of the most outgoing, happy, confident people in this industry. I've loved what I've done my whole life. If this can happen to me, this can happen to anybody.
Yeah.
And so I mean, the short story is I sold my house and I launched a nonprofit to carry on this mission to help first responders learn modalities to not do what we've always done, which is reactive care to the symptoms of PTSD, but our trademark is putting PTSD out of business, training them how to deal with the trauma and stress that they're exposed to.
Yeah, you're doing amazing work, and I'm so excited to learn more. I want to go back into some of these details, though, because there's just a lot of juicy stuff there from a life experience and pearls of wisdom standpoint. But first of all, let's just define first responders, just in case some of the listeners don't know, like who's actually under that category of first responders.
So that includes paramedics, EMTs, firefighters, law enforcement, emergency nurses, doctors, and dispatchers.
Wow. So these are the people that see the most horrific things that happen to human bodies, spirits, in the most horrific ways. These and have to make critical split decisions about how they're going to try to help save someone.
Their whole lives become hypervigilant, and they don't realize it. That they tell themselves they're not taking it home, but they are. And it becomes to infect who they are, and we become addicted to the hormones of stress, and it begins to drive what's happening in our lives.
Well, tell us about that, because from my experience with some of the people that I know that are firefighters, a lot of people get into it because they have a really big, compassionate heart, right? And they want to help.
Right.
And so they're in this field helping, but they're suffering themselves from all of this stress. So how did you sort of identify? I mean, I know when the universe makes us pause with, a diagnosis, then it's an absolute, we have to reflect. But before that, how did you find any tools to manage that level of stress? And, how do you get images out of your mind that you really can never get out of your mind? I don't know, maybe that's not a good question, but you know what I'm saying.
It's a great question. It's an honest question. And for those of us on the job, we're not really trained. No one trains us in the beginning. By the way, this is what you're going to see, and this is how to deal with it. They train us with, you're going to probably get post-traumatic stress, and here's what it looks like, and here's what to do once you have it. what I do specifically is I look at everything from the childhood, which brought us into this industry in the first place, because there's a reason people say the second most common thing people say to us when they find out that we're paramedics or firefighters or police officers is, how do you do that for a living? I could never do that for a living, because most people aren't attracted to doing this. But that follows the second question that people ask, which is, what's the worst thing you've ever seen? And that question actually triggers the first responder unconsciously to relive the memories. And those memories are not just psychological, they're stored in your tissues.
Yeah, at a cellular level.
At a cellular level. And so what we do is we start by addressing what brought us into the industry in the first place. Almost all of us come out of addictive households, alcoholic households, or abuse, where in that first 7 years, your brain is in what's called a theta state. It's almost a hypnotic state where children take in information without questioning it.
Yeah, they're conditioning.
They're conditioning.
Yeah.
And so as we are children seeing these environments of dysfunction, somewhere in our psyche and in our heart, our thought is, I need to help people. I want to help my mom. I want to help my dad or my grandma. And so as an adult, we're drawn to this industry. And there's something called an ACEs score, Adverse Childhood Experience score, which often many of us have a very high ACEs score because we were raised in these homes.
Now, is this something you've developed with your organization, this scoring system? Or
No, this has been designed by therapists, by psychologists who've done the research on this. So I really would consider myself sort of a researcher now, just by what I've been doing. So finding out initially there's an ACEs score that's very high for us, I began to look at what was happening to us. So what I realized, Beth, is that it's not just psychological, which is what we've always treated. Talk therapy, peer counseling, critical incident stress meetings and debriefings. This actually is far more comprehensive and complex. It is neuroanatomical. There are changes that take place to the human brain when you're under regular degrees of stress. The amygdala, the hippocampus, the hypothalamus, the limbic system is affected and altered. There are physical changes when you suppress your emotions, which everyone prides us on doing.
Yes.
You store that energy in your body.
Yes. Well, I mean, you kind of have to almost suppress the emotion. It's like,
no one gets out of an ambulance on the scene of a call crying.
Right.
So we're good at that. We suppress our emotions. But what we aren't taught is how to discharge that energy. So we train them how to discharge the energy so that they don't store the energy in their bodies. It becomes cancer. Anytime there's irritation or inflammation, there's an invitation for cancer. So we train them how to do that.
So nobody currently does this within these organizations.
Correct.
Within the firefighting organizations, associations, they don't do this kind of work.
No, they don't do this kind of work.
And does anyone, or do you as the organization, do this access test with people? Because, you know, it sounds like it got developed sort of as a retrospective look back, let's try to figure something out, as opposed to let's try to identify about this character before they get in, so we can do the best to support them in the job they feel called to do, but not take themselves down in the process.
Well, that's the key there, is that it's a proactive approach. So we're coming at it from the beginning, and we're training first responders on their nervous systems. What's happening to your nervous system when you're repeatedly exposed and in this fight, flight, or freeze state? How do you shut that off so that you can go home and be available and engaged? Because what often happens is we have broken relationships because we're emotionally detached, which makes us good at what we do. And we tell ourselves, well, I can't have feelings at home. I wouldn't want to let the wall down for fear that we won't be able to get it back up.
Interesting point. Yes.
So we train them in the nervous system. We train them in the neuroanatomy. We talk about hemi-sync, incorporating right brain modalities and not just left brain hypervigilance. Emotional and relational components that allow them to have healthy, loving, engaged, connected relationships outside of what they do for a living.
Yeah, I think that's really a key point, and I want to talk a whole lot more about that. We're going to take a really quick break, and we'll be right back.
Okay.
Blossom Bliss products are designed to help empower pure love and purpose in your life. It's through the power of words, flowers, and symbols that our products assist you in creating a blissful life. The power of words in our mini mantra word bar necklaces assist you in setting and blossoming your personal intentions. The affirmation cards leverage the power of flowers by providing daily inspiration. And the power of symbols in our life journey bracelets are great reminders of the things that bring us peace, joy, and love. Products are made and blessed in Bali with love by Balinese artisans who work with empowered hearts. When you purchase jewelry with a bee charm, we donate to save the bees. Join us in pollinating the planet with love. Go to our website, blossomblissbali.com. Again, that's blossomblissbali.com.
Okay, we're back with Susan Farren, and we were just in a really deep discussion, I think, about what your work is.
Yeah.
But I want to go back to you personally, because we left on the note of how this particular job really has a cellular level impact on people's relationships. And I think there's a lot of people that aren't really feeling into that and understanding that. And so how people release and express that seems to be oftentimes through drugs, alcohol, bar talk, that kind of thing. So there's a huge community component I want to talk about. But for you personally, tell us a little bit more about your personal story, in the sense that all these things happened to you that we talked about, and then you said, I want to start this nonprofit. I mean, that's like a huge undertaking. And I always like to think that, like, if we really knew what we were in for with some of these things, we would never do them, right? So take us back to the time when you got inspired, and some of the fears that you maybe had to overcome to now be a nonprofit organization, and everything that comes with the organization of it, but the management of it, the creation of it. You know, talk a little bit about how you broke through some of those fears.
Okay. So what really was the inspirational moment for me was I had gone back home and written down everything I could find. And I've been researching almost every day now for 3 years. Every day I read an article, or I listen to something, a podcast, or I look up for something to do with first responders and how they're coping with their careers. And I had all this information on butcher paper surrounding my family room wall, covering baby pictures and whatnot, because I felt like I was on a totally almost an unconscious mission to change the culture of our industry, which is really what I'm trying to do.
Yes.
And I gave my first presentation at a small fire department in the town where I live, the community where I live, called Sonoma. And the battalion chief heard my story, and he was so moved by the message that he gave me a chance to speak to the entire shift. And the first responders, the firefighters and the paramedics in the room were just, they were like, oh my gosh, how did you figure this out? And I said, I survived it, and I started doing the reading on it, and I knew, and this is really the truth, Beth, all my life I knew we needed help. I knew, I saw my partners getting sick, addicted, and divorced and killing themselves. And it was a secret. It's like this dirty little secret that we keep inside our industry, because we don't want people to see us, you know, as victims. We are the rescuers.
You're the heroes.
We don't want to be the patients. And so as I began to look at what we were doing and how we were keeping this inside, and I finally went out and told my story to the first crew, and they said, what are you going to do? I realized I have to do something. I can't just have the information. And I said, I'm going to sell my house, and I'm going to start a nonprofit. And I went to my children. I have 5 kids. And I asked permission from the kids to sell the house. And I said, I feel like this is what I was born to do. Like the universe brought me to this place. I was allowed to get sick. I was allowed to hear that message about first responders and organ cancer. I found the research that showed that we had a life expectancy is 15 years less than civilians.
Interesting.
We were 40% more likely to die by suicide than we were in line of duty death. And there's only a 35% reporting rate, which means the statistics are much higher than that. And we all think we're alone because we don't talk about it.
Yes.
So when I made that decision to sell the house, as you would know, as a fellow spiritual dweller, that less than 24 hours later, through a series of conversations with friends, somebody made an offer on my house.
And did you get fear reflected from your children, or were they all just...
It's interesting. Children have this way of seeing the world through hope and faith that I think we sometimes lose as adults. Mm-hmm. And one of my younger sons, Roman, said to me, Mom, maybe this is what you were meant to do all along. if you feel, he said, if you feel like this is what God is telling you to do, Mom, then we need to do it. So they were in with me. We need to do this.
Yeah.
So I have been terrified. I would be lying if I didn't say that I was terrified. I sold my children's childhood home of 23 years. I moved into a rental market 3 weeks before the worst fire we'd seen in Sonoma County history hit.
Wow.
Then the fire hit, and our whole lives were changed by that. And yet I continued to move forward, figuring out, what do I have to do to get this thing off the ground? And it's been painful. It's been terrifying for anybody who's thinking about, I have this burning desire to do something, but I'm not sure it's my calling. I believe that if you just take those first few steps, but you have to take the steps first, the way will be made. A way will be made where there is no way. And that's how I knew I was on the right path. In that first 24 hours, I had a friend offer to buy the house from me. Every place I went and told my story, there were people saying, holy cow, what are we going to do about this? And I literally have gone door to door to door to door, asking people to hear my story and see if they would help me help the first responders.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think I always like to think of them as lanterns, you know, when you choose a path and there's a lantern that's lit, but you don't always know the next 5 or the next 10.
Right.
And it can feel a little bit like you're walking in the dark.
Yeah.
But you're really walking in the light.
Yeah.
If you just are in that inspired action kind of feel, like, okay, this is the next step, this is the next step. And as you described it, that's the images that came to me, is just really trusting in your connection to your purpose.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think
how did you get there, though? Because that oftentimes is the hardest part. You already hit it on the head. You already said it's fear, but
I think the illusion that a lot of people have, I maybe speak for myself, is when I've heard other people's stories, I thought, well, yeah, but they had, savings account, or, oh yeah, they had this, or the doors opened, or they got. No, I literally have done this one bated breath, faithful moment at a time. And the universe has opened doors. God has opened doors that I could not, just like I said, a way was made where there was no way, where all of a sudden I was standing in front of the 8 top fire chiefs for CAL FIRE and giving a presentation with a dry erase pen and a dry erase board, not some fancy presentation, not some pitch deck, not some, beautiful organized PowerPoint. It was me and a dry erase pen and a firefighter, a retired firefighter who I'd known for 30 years, who heard about what I was doing and asked to join me.
Yeah.
We gave this presentation, and before we drove out of town, the training chief of CAL FIRE called and said, "You're in with CAL FIRE. We need your help."
Yeah. I can see where they would immediately go, wow, someone's identifying and hearing us and feeling us. I would also imagine that there's, because of that hero mentality, maybe some resistance to some of it as well, or does everyone continue to just jump on board? I mean, it seems like I don't want to say an easy thing, but in a sense, like, as soon as you started telling me about this, I was like, absolutely. It's just, it makes so much sense that there's this need. But from the firefighters themselves, from the paramedics themselves, have you had any resistance?
So that's a great question, and I will answer that very honestly. Yes.
Yeah.
And the resistance is from people who haven't heard our story.
Okay.
So when I reach out to a department who has not actually heard my story, or maybe doesn't understand the concept of what we're doing, they say, no, we have peer counseling. Oh, no, we have a therapist in house. Or, no, we've got this.
Yeah.
And a lot of times what will happen, and I've worked with sometimes department chiefs who are they're just shut off to the idea, because this is the way we've always done it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and this isn't fluffy stuff. This is like data-driven, science-driven, like, these are the facts. Let's make a difference. Let's change the trajectory and the future of these people who are dedicating their lives to something so important.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm not a neuroscientist, and I'm not a researcher, and I'm not a doctor, and I'm not a therapist. I am a medically retired paramedic who happens to be a woman, speaking to an almost predominantly male-dominated industry, saying, there's a problem, but I have an answer. And it works. And so at this point, in 15 months, literally from the time that we launched as a nonprofit, I was alone in this for the first 6 months until Ron joined me, the firefighter. And collectively, he and I have created programs with guest speakers and stuff. We've done 5 conferences. We've spoken all across the U.S. We just came back from the World Congress Conference and the California Emergency Disaster Conference in Palm Springs. In doing all of these things, word is getting out. And the first responders who are resistant are hearing from other first responders, holy cow, what they're doing
She's
is
not
working.
giving up. This lady's going
She's not
for
going
it.
away. She's not going away.
Yeah.
And what we're doing works. So for those, and when you asked me early on, is there anybody else doing this? Sure, there are people who are aware of things that we have to do. One of the highway patrol officers, I love, it's like my favorite nickname. He said, "Are you the nervous system lady?" And I thought, well, I guess, yes, I am, because I train them on their nervous system. See, the illusion is I'm depressed because I'm weak, or I'm depressed because I don't know how to cope. No, you're probably depressed because your nervous system is fried. And let me tell you how that happens, and let me tell you how we can get that back online. Because as our trademark is, putting PTSD out of business, there are two things. Number one, PTSD is not a disorder, it's an injury. It's an injury from either cumulative or acute stress in situations where you feel that you're overwhelmed from being able to process information. So it's not a disorder. Okay. It's an injury.
I like that distinction. I've never heard someone say that, but I understand that, and I think
schizophrenia is a disorder. Post-traumatic stress is an injury. And like in any injury, we can treat it.
Yes.
And you can get well.
Yes.
But you have to follow the treatment. And there are people doing pieces of those modalities. Part of our training people are bringing in mindful meditation as part of that. Nervous system training is part of that. We actually have a form of first responder yoga, which allows people to align both their bodies, their minds, and their breathing.
Love that.
So it's very holistic.
Yes.
It's entirely holistic. And we talk about all of those things, including suicide awareness. We talk about addiction issues, and we talk about nutrition and well-being. And so to go back to the beginning, have I been afraid? Every day.
Yeah.
Have I cried myself to sleep? A lot. Scared and asking myself, what have I done? I've sold my home. What have I done? I've taken away all my own stability, a regular paycheck, medical benefits. And I tell myself some mornings, I can't do it. I can't do one more day of this. And then the next day comes.
It's that big-hearted caregiver in you that is giving. And I think now I do see what you're doing is also a balance. That it's tough in the beginning, but you sort of get that back, right? So it's like you're not just giving, you're giving and you're making a huge difference. And hopefully it is giving back to you right now. But interesting stuff. There's so many questions I have, and one of them is about childhood, but we're going to take a quick break and we're going to come back, and I want to get into that because I think that could be a touchy spot for some people.
It's all right. We'll do it.
Blossom Bliss products are designed to help empower pure love and purpose in your life. It's through the power of words, flowers, and symbols that our products assist you in creating a blissful life. The power of words in our mini mantra word bar necklaces assist you in setting and blossoming your personal intentions. The affirmation cards leverage the power of flowers by providing daily inspiration. And the power of symbols in our life journey bracelets are great reminders of the things that bring us peace, joy, and love. Products are made and blessed in Bali with love by Balinese artisans who work with empowered hearts. When you purchase jewelry with a bee charm, we donate to save the bees. Join us in pollinating the planet with love. Go to our website, blossomblissbali.com. Again, that's blossomblissbali.com.
Okay, we're back, and we were talking about a lot of, I think, really important subjects, but one of the things that I want to go back to is this testing system, maybe evaluation system, the AXIS. How would you call it?
I was referring to the ACEs score, which we don't
score.
Actually make our candidates take that. We're just aware that is, at least in today's society, it's a score keeping or a score taking process that therapists will sometimes work with people to find out how high their ACEs scores is, and it actually helps them determine whether or not they are more likely to come down sick, or have issues with depression.
Well, the reason why I bring that back up is I feel like that ACEs score, not knowing all the details around it, is something that should be implemented even in our university systems before someone goes into college. Because what I'm hearing, I don't have children of my own, but what I'm hearing from professors and the lady Valerie that I'm with here in the retreats, these children are coming into university ill-equipped for life. And there's lots of components to that, but it's not about pegging someone as, you know, based on their childhood, but it's about, again, trying to find ways to support people. So I was just curious, but it sounds like that's still more of an evaluation tool. It's not something that's being used proactively as people are signing up to be a paramedic.
Correct.
Okay.
And I think, you know, everyone's different. You know, if you look at my ACEs score, you realize that based on how I grew up and what I experienced in the first 15, 20 years of my life, I should be medicated on a sofa somewhere and really not doing what I'm doing today. And I think sometimes what happens with testing, especially if you get results, is you can almost begin to justify your disability. And I say disability being the story you're telling yourself about why I'm not able to do something with my life. And all I have to say is nonsense. Right now, right here at this moment, I can choose. My past is behind me and no longer controls me. My future is yet unwritten. But who I am today, showing up in this environment, speaking to you, that's all I have any influence over, the next words that come out of my mouth. No, it's so important. So, okay, so tell us a little bit more. You started sharing a lot of stuff about the organization, what it does. And so a foundation has been built. You're working directly with other firefighter associations, paramedic associations. How do you get the word out there? How do you get into these facilities that need you the most? So the first thing obviously was what I did is I began calling people, literally cold calling people and going to departments and saying, this is what I'm working on, this is what I'm doing. I began telling my friends, people began to hear my story, colleagues began to talk to me, meet with me, say me too, kind of our own Me Too campaign of depression and stress. And then word got out very quickly. I love this line, it's telephone, telegram, tell a firefighter. And people would tell. And then I'd be invited in to speak in a classroom, or I'd be invited in to talk to a paramedic academy. Then I got invited in to speak to the Highway Patrol, and then I got invited in to speak to CAL FIRE, and then I got invited in to speak at the World Congress Conference on Critical Incident Stress, and then I got invited into another conference, and before you knew it, I had told my story to 1,000 people. I was on a Channel 2 News, and then I was on a radio show, and then another radio show, and it's just like you said, Beth, and I think this is the hardest part for us as a society. We are being groomed to be afraid. If you're watching television, I can promise you that you're hearing this message every 2.5 or 3 minutes. You're inadequate. You don't have enough. You need a bigger house, a bigger car, a newer this, a younger that, a thinner this, a perkier that. It's take a medication, take a pill, do this, do this. Talk to your doctor if this might be right. And how about we just step back from this chronic message of fear and inadequacy and begin to believe that you are enough, that as ill-equipped as I feel, as I'm not attractive enough, I'm not young enough, I'm not blah, 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 blah. Every day, regardless, I got up and said, today I'm going to fight this fight. Today I'm going to keep one more first responder from feeling alone. I may not be able to stop people from taking their own lives because they want the pain to stop. But what I can do is I can give people hope. And I just, as one example, may I? That we got a phone call a few months ago from a department that was not related in any way to me, that had gotten a phone call from another department saying that the wife of a firefighter had caught him trying to hang himself in the garage. And they called us, and I'd never done this personally before. And Ron and I drove to this young man's house and sat with him for 3.5 hours. And we talked about what was happening to him physically, psychologically, and what we said is, you're not alone. We are all first responders, and we are out here to help other first responders. And there is an answer that does not include taking your life and leaving your wife a widow and your child fatherless. Help us help you. And so here's our mission statement. Starting with ourselves, because everybody who works for us has got to be doing the self-care. So starting with ourselves, we train those who save others to save themselves. We don't save them. We show them how to save themselves. And there is some resistance of, I don't need to be saved.
Right.
I don't need to be saved. I'm like, okay, that's all good. That's all right. Take that position. Give me 10 minutes to tell you my story. And then, after I've had that first 10 minutes, they realize, oh, this girl's for real.
Yeah.
Like, she's not going away.
Yeah.
And she's on a mission, because I believe that I got a second chance at life. That terminal diagnosis became a non-terminal diagnosis, and I believe I was given a second chance, and I am making as much of every minute of my life as I can right now.
Yeah. Wow. How can we help you? We being the listeners, how do we help bring this awareness? How do we help bring your organization through? What can we do?
Well, I think communication is the number one thing that people can do. Of course, I'd love people to go check out our website, which is Resiliency First, and that is the word resiliency and then 1ST.
Okay.
Resiliency1st.org.
And I'll put it in the links below. Yep.
Yeah. So people can find out what we're doing. More importantly, they can begin to have a conversation with people around them that they know are first responders about getting us in to do this training.
Yes.
Because honestly, in the 800 people that we've trained, at least, in all these people that we've trained, 100% of the surveys have been positive. There's not a single survey we've gotten that says, I'm not so sure this is going to work. People are having these life-altering experiences as a result of being introduced to these modalities and information.
Yeah.
So let go of the fear, create the invitation for us to come in and be able to provide this information. And of course, like any nonprofit, as I learned today or this weekend in this training, social profit. I am a social profit.
Yes.
I am inviting people to partner with us to change this culture. I am inviting people, I'm giving them the opportunity to be on the ground floor of a change in culture that will change, transform, and save lives. And people can do that through providing us support. You can't raise money any other way than telling your story and asking those who feel strongly about something as important as this, saying, you know what, I'm not going to watch idly as first responders become despondent, depressed, addicted, divorced, and suicidal.
Yeah.
I may not be able to help them personally, but I can help her.
Yeah.
And she's helping them personally.
Yes.
And that's what I'm looking for, is people to partner with us emotionally, through communication, and financially, to help us get this message out there and help those who are saving others save themselves.
I love that. And of course, it seems so obvious now how you're pollinating the planet with love. I can almost answer it myself, but how would you say that your organization is pollinating the planet with love?
Oh, I love that question. So this comes from a place of love, and I believe that. When you said it best when I first met you, which is when you can feel this coming from someone's heart. You know if someone's doing that out of a desire to make money, or they have a hidden agenda, or they're manipulating a situation, because it begins in a place of love and support from those of us who are serving. Every time we speak into the life of another first responder or their family members, that's an important key to mention. We train the family members as well.
Yeah.
So when people come to our conferences, their families can come on the third day of our conference, and we train them about what's happening and how to help.
Yeah.
So every time we speak to someone, we pass that message on, and then we allow them to pass it on to the next person.
Pollinate.
We are pollinating, and I am pollinating a certain type of flower, as it were. If we think of bees and how they're doing their work, every insect is drawn to a different type of flower, and only a daffodil really understands what it's like to be a daffodil.
Right.
And as silly as that may sound, that's why we're all first responders, training first responders, because as a first responder myself, I know that when I'm talking to someone who doesn't know what I did for a living, it's impossible for me to adequately communicate, not just what we see. You can see that in TV and the movies and talk to people. It's what we hear, it's what we smell, it's what we feel, it's the sounds and the scents and the things that are so sensory saturated in our industry that really change how we feel.
Yeah.
And I know that because I've done that.
Yeah.
And so when I'm talking to another daffodil and I say, I know exactly what it's like to be a daffodil. As a matter of fact, here's my experience as a daffodil. And all the other daffodils go, oh, she's a daffodil. I'd recognize that daffodil anywhere.
Yeah, I love that. Well, as you were talking, I also got this visual of how wonderful it would be to see first responders doing the Pollinating Love Mudra, and how, the tough person, the hero, to really take that time to connect. Would you be willing to do the Pollinating Love Mudra with me?
I would be honored.
Okay, let's do it together. So we put our fingertips together, our wrists together. We've created our little lotus flower. We put it up to our 4th chakra, touching our chest here, and then just let's put a little love in there for whatever makes us feel, whether it's where we are, or a person, or a pet, a child. Feeling that love in our hearts, and then just putting a little bit into that, or a lot into that lotus flower. Maybe even feeling your hands warm in between, and seeing that little ball of light. And then we'll open our eyes when we've got it in there, and we'll share it. Okay, so we share our bliss blossoming out into the world. And namaste.
Namaste.
Yay.
Thank you.
Yes,
thank you for helping us pollinate the world with the love that we have for first responders.
Yes, thank you. I'm really excited about that, and I think the mudra, as I was listening to, I'm like, wow, it's one of those things that brings you back to center. And maybe they won't end up doing the actual mudra, but experiencing it at least once, I think, brings people back to the importance of making that connection to ourselves, being grounded, but also making the connection to others. Because as you're running around as a paramedic trying to save someone's life, you're not stopping sometimes as a team to connect and to just feel, so that you can, as you've said so eloquently, release the emotion, so you're not storing it, moving forward. So there's little ritualistic things like the mudra that I think can be also so helpful to release and to just be present and to...
Can I make a comment on that?
Yeah.
Something that I love about what you're doing is that, as we talked about commercials and TV and how it's always telling you, separating you from your adequacy and your value and your worth, something that I think about is that our whole society tells us the answers are outside of you. The answers are outside of you. So we learn more, we do more, we buy more. It's always about not having enough. That's what we learned in 1440 with Lynn today. She was talking to us about this, and just knowing that this is fundraising from the heart, knowing that the truth is, and as hippy-dippy as this sounds, the answers are inside of us.
Absolutely.
And they always have been. And we specifically are a generation, or I should say a profession of people who have taken care of looking outside to evaluate where's the threat, where's the crisis, where's the emergency, where's the problem, where's the chaos, and then we go towards that. And what we were never trained to do is go inside. Yeah. And the key to the prison we live in is hidden right inside.
Yeah, it's unlocking that inner wisdom that sits there for us at any point in time that we want to connect to it, which is also the beauty and the analogy of why I'm all about flowers, because they've taught me the 4 life lessons and many, many more lessons. But a flower doesn't, as you started talking about daffodils, a flower doesn't worry about the external realities that could be seen. It just sits and is, and and knows that it's going to blossom, and allows the universe to support that. So yes, I am so blessed to have you on the show today.
As I am blessed to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yay. All right. Okay, wishing you bliss so that you too can help in pollinating the planet with love. Hear who's up next when you like my page, Beth Bell Live, and join me each week as I invite a new guest into the mobile recording studio to help in pollinating the planet with love.